So today we're going to talk about theory. Oh great, I know you're thinking, this is what I've come to the internet to watch. Well, for those of you who didn't come to watch this, here's a picture of two baby otters holding hands. You might be thinking that theory is hard, confusing, stupid, lame, or pointless. When we imagine people talking about theory, you can probably imagine a group of crazy-head professors babbling using a bunch of big words that nobody understands. You're afraid of them because A, you'll either feel stupid, or B, you'll be completely distrustful of them. It's kind of like those creepy twin kids who end up making their own language. But secret languages lose their scary secretness when you know what all the words mean. So one of our goals today is to teach you some language to talk about theory and foil your secret baby's plans. So we're probably going to throw a lot of confusing words out that might be new to you, and we'll try to explain them so you can be a theory wizard. So aside from making you seem aloof and superior to everyone else, what is the purpose of having theories? So theory can be used in a number of ways. It can be used to take a situation represented by this box and break it down and help make it simpler to understand what's going on. Or theory might be used to do the opposite. It might take that same box, shake it around, and break it into pieces, and be interested in looking at only the bigger pieces while paying less attention to the rest. In both these cases, the point that I'm trying to make is that theory is used to frame and structure how you look at a problem. So whether you want to break it down into smaller, more understandable pieces, or use it to focus on only a specific set of issues. Naturally, some theories are more appropriate for looking at some things than others. For example, you probably won't get very far using a theory on how an individual's brain processes information to explain how flash mobs assemble spontaneously. Though you can certainly try. We'll talk more about this later. The other thing to know about theories is that the communities that people form around theories can be pretty dramatic, like high school dramatic. To draw an analogy from the critically acclaimed teen vampire series Twilight, you might say that some theorists are Team Jacob while others are Team Edward. Sometimes these divisions are so strong that they can even tear cute baby otters apart. And then there are those who are like Bella, who are confused about which mythical monster she's really in love with, and runs around despairing the whole freaking series about why we all can't just get along. I hate these types of theorists not because they single-handedly ruin a potentially fascinating vampire love story, but because I find theories to be much more exciting when they outrightly challenge each other, focus on their differences, add something new, and in the end make it easier to pick out from the crowd. To make an analogy from Twilight once again, you might say that only an idiot could ever get vampires and werewolves confused. Say hi to Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Hi. Laura is a UX consultant out of San Diego and is flying to Seattle to meet with her team. Because she can't teleport straight to Seattle, she has to do some thinking and make some decisions about how she's going to get there. One way we can try to get in Laura's mind is to draw from cognitive theory. Cognitive theory is an approach to understand how the mind takes in and processes sensory information or input and uses that to take action. Put simply, cognitive theory equates the mind to a computer. Information, such as the time the plane is leaving on her itinerary, comes into the processing unit, or her brain, which then makes decisions and actions based on that. For example, Laura wants to get her coffee and she knows she needs to leave now to make sure she has time to stop at Starbucks before her plane leaves. You're probably thinking that this is a really simplistic way to look at things, and you're right. Cognitive theory is a very mechanistic approach to how cognition works. It has been challenged by others because it assumes that people process information as if they were robots. So Laura now has just 20 minutes to get to the airport, and she knows she wants to stop on the way at Starbucks to get her 16-ounce mocha frappuccino with extra whip. Laura's mind is processing signals from her stomach, and she has only 20 minutes to get to the airport. Can she get her coffee and catch a flight in time? Her mind processes all of the information available: current time of flight, travel time to the airport, approximate time to order and receive coffee. Cognitive theory assumes that she has a rational way of making her decision about whether she goes to Starbucks or goes straight to the airport. Because people are not robots, this theory often doesn't have much weight. Maybe we can revisit this theory at another time when our world has been dominated by robot overlords, so let's move away from this theory for now. So now let's talk about mental models. Just what is a mental model? At this moment, you might be thinking of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition, walking down a catwalk. While Cindy may be your mental model of a model, that's not what I'm talking about here. The theory of mental models comes from cognitive science. A model is a person's mental image of the surrounding world. It draws relationships between the external and internal world. Mental models help shape behavior and define our approach to solving problems and carrying out tasks. Mental models are handy because they can be used to help train a user on a system or help to explain a user's interaction with the system. For example, we've all adjusted the thermostats in our rooms. You think by moving the dial up from 65 to say 85 degrees, your room will heat up much faster than if you moved it to 70 degrees, your ideal room warmth. This is your mental model of how a thermostat works. But in reality, the system works in a much more complicated way, like this. Okay, so let's get back to Laura. She just landed at SeaTac Airport and is picking up her rental car. She drives around her normal route to her team's office. She does this from memory using landmarks as her guide. But today her route is closed and she's forced through a detour. Here she faces a problem. She's never been the other way. She's only ever been this one way. In fact, she's never been anywhere else in Seattle, just to the office and then back to the airport. For Laura, her mental model of the city looks like this. She has traveled her original route at least 6 times, creating a map of how she envisions the city. After exiting the freeway, she knows to turn right at the second light. When she sees a donut shop on the left, she knows that at the next light she'll have to take a left. At the next block, she sees a Starbucks in the right corner, and this is her next left turn. But today she is forced on a route she's never taken, and suddenly her mental model of Seattle starts to expand and change. Not unlike my disdain for Bella. Laura arrives at her office only to find that during the time she was being detoured, her morning meeting has been moved up and she's 15 minutes late. Why can't all systems work in perfect harmony? Here we need to look at a theory called distributed cognition, or what theoreticians affectionately and perhaps too hiply call DCOG. DCOG is the red-headed stepchild of cognitive science that proposes knowledge and cognition are not confined to the individual. Instead, cognition is distributed across individuals, objects, artifacts, and tools in the environment. Culture is a big part of it too, because it accumulates partial solutions. For example, the calendar that we know today was developed over many centuries to address the challenge of time management. DCOG makes use of ethnography to analyze how humans use systems collaboratively to problem solve, or how mental activity is externalized into the world as people create external representations to support their own activity or collaborative actions. What does this mean exactly? Let's use an example. A good one in this story would be the act of scheduling a team meeting. One person looks at the team's calendars, decides on a date and time, and sends out a proposal for the meeting. Other team members receive the meeting request in their email box. They review the appointment, most accepted, and it gets added to their calendars. But maybe one of them will suggest a different time or send an email back to the scheduler asking for a time change. Then the scheduler has to begin the whole process over again. This is an example of DCOG because the calendar system mediates the task of making and remembering appointments. Team members don't need to keep all of their calendar information in their heads and hope each member of their team can psychically know when they are supposed to meet. In Laura's situation, someone requested the time change via email to the team 30 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to change. And since the scheduler didn't send out an update, the meeting on the calendar itself was updated. And since the scheduler didn't actually send out an update in the scheduling system, the meeting on the calendar itself was not updated. Problem is, Laura was only checking her calendar, not her email, so she didn't get the time change. Meanwhile, the other team members received the email and arrived at the boardroom on time. This sort of thing happens a lot. Computer-supported collaborative work, or CSCW, is most effective when everyone is using the same artifacts and tools to collaborate. Today that didn't happen, and as a result, Laura is late. Laura is supposed to be presenting her usability test findings and recommendations to the team. Without her, the team is wasting precious time. She knows at this point that she needs to convince the team that she is still a legitimate team member and was honestly late due to a reroute, and so she wants to crack a joke to bring the team spirit back up. Unfortunately for DCOG, it doesn't really have a good way to describe how schmoozing is used to smooth rough edges on a team. How do these team members feel about each other, and how does this affect how they work together? To understand this level of interaction, I'll need to go away from the systems-oriented thinking of distributed cognition and delve into social psychology. So rather than look at how each part of a process functions, such as the people and artifacts that make up a DCOG ecosystem, social psychology looks at how people interact with each other. It explains why we like to take it easy when nobody is looking, fit into the crowd, and why we try to look our best when people are looking at us. So Laura cracked a couple bad jokes at the meeting. However, the developer Eugene absolutely hates Laura. Here he is looking villainous behind his laptop screen. As if being named Eugene was not enough, you can just imagine the pale cast of his laptop shining across his sun-deprived face. You can bet that this misplaced resentment makes meetings awkward. Social psychology can be used to explain the impact of these types of awkward social interactions. So you might predict that the developer's deep loathing of Laura is actually detrimental to the group. But in fact it isn't. Firstly, he's a developer, so he actually really hates everyone, not just Laura. Secondly, he manages to keep it all together because he actually likes being part of the company he works at. This type of behavior can be described by common identity theory. This theory basically says that people can feel socially attached to each other based on some sense of shared identity. For Eugene, he likes knowing that he works for a great company, and that's enough to keep him pretty productive with this group of people. He doesn't have any personal attachments to any of these team members per se, but working at the company is enough. The opposite is true for the project manager, Jean-Pierre, who has googly eyes for Laura. He sort of hates his job, and if it weren't for the secret hope of seeing Laura once every quarter, he probably would quit his job and spend the rest of his days raising organic ginger in Hawaii. This type of attachment to his job can be explained by common bond theory, which basically says the reason that Jean-Pierre is sticking with the project is because of his personal attachment to Laura and not his attachment to the corporation. When Laura finally gets to the meeting, she is both profusely apologetic, but also profusely sweaty. She wants to start the meeting off by expressing her disappointment at the lack of feedback she got from a draft report. The only person who left any comments was Jean-Pierre, who, if you remember from a few seconds ago, is worrisomely in love with Laura. This blatant laziness and shirking of responsibility by the team is called social loafing. Basically, people in groups don't do their fair share of the work because they figure someone else will be doing it. The only reason Jean-Pierre even does it in the first place is because he's hoping to get recognition from Laura for his efforts. A lot of this stuff about social psychology might seem pretty obvious. We can relate to some of these behaviors from our own experiences from working in groups. But the problem with applying it is that there are just so many social psychology theories out there that are so minutely focused on specific types of behaviors that you would have to string together a bunch of theories together to make a coherent argument, and nobody has time for that.